The police can now legally use cell phone grabbers for mass surveillance. Minister of Justice and Correctional Services Ronald Lamola has signed a 5-year certificate of exemption under RICA to allow cops to intercept cell phone communication. Let's speak now to Karam Singh from Corruption Watch and Ian Cameron from Action Society. A big thank you to both our guests. Perhaps we'll start with an understanding, or your understanding at least, in terms of what essentially the rules around this say or prescribe. Good afternoon, Karam.
Good afternoon. Thanks so much for having me on the program. Yeah, this is a very interesting development. I mean, my understanding is, the police now have got this approval to acquire the technology that they didn't previously have access to, obviously. And the consequences of this is, potential to use technology to do different types of surveillance, including intercepting certain types of cell phone communication. Now, I think, in and of itself, if we were dealing with a police force that we had a complete trust in terms of its, it not being corrupt, not being subjected to abuse of power or even collusion, that in and of itself, the procurement of the technology is a positive development in that it could help law enforcement in a context where it's often very difficult to pursue successful investigations, particularly in the area of corruption. I think the challenge then is sort of how the police ultimately use this technology and whether they use it in a way which is has a basic respect for privacy rights, and that it's subjected to other kinds of oversight and approval, including, judicial sanction for search and seizures, which is the normal case when the police seek to do a search and seizure, that they need some type of approval from a judicial officer. So that's the context in which I'm understanding the issue.
Sure. Thank you for that. So, Ian, how it is used, I think that has been an issue of concern for a number of South Africans, especially, Karam, when you speak of privacy rights. So, Ian, your understanding?
Yeah, I'm very concerned. I agree with everything that Karam has just said. I think, to me, what bothers me is that in terms of it's one part that a court of law would not need to sign off on a warrant to use the technology, but what essentially also worries me is the fact that the senior command of the South African Police Service no longer, in my opinion, has the relevant integrity that we can rest assured that it will be used carefully and only under very, very specific circumstances. The police track record in terms of corruption and other unethical practices really does stand out. We all know this. There's no secret about it. And look, the use of grabbers is actually not new. We know that it was previously procured for the ANC's Nasrec conference in 2017. We know of the involvement of the previous National Commissioner, the current Minister of Police, and the previous Minister of Police, Fikile Mbalula. And I'm utterly concerned that it will also be used as a bit of an iron fist for political factions and to abuse it for other political matters, rather than actually focusing on using it to combat organized or other serious crime.
With that, Ian, does that then suggest that with organizations like yourself as well as Corruption Watch, Karam, will come to you in a moment, that there was no consultation?
Certainly not with us. I think you know that us and the police minister don't always sit around the same table. But despite several attempts from us to engage in discussion regarding different matters with the police, that door has slowly started narrowing and actually closed completely. I know of several organizations and people, I'll hear from Karam now, but that really is facing severe challenges, because up until about 5 years ago, you could still speak to someone in the police, and that has just deteriorated to the point where you really struggle to keep members accountable and to communicate properly.
Karam, any engagement or consultation with your organization at least?
No, there wasn't any consultation, and I can't speak obviously for broadly in civil society, because there are other civil society organizations that may be working more closely or have regular consultations with the police. But certainly it wasn't an issue that was canvassed with Corruption Watch.
Karam, you mentioned a number of issues, especially when it comes to the police force, essentially a trust deficit. You're concerned about the corruption and abuse of power, and you also want to know how these grabbers are going to be used in light of privacy rights. And so, in a nutshell, what should South Africans be thinking about when this is concerned? Are we going to even be seeing possibly increased amounts of people heading to the courts to sort of reverse some of the actions or the decisions that have been made by the police?
It really remains to be seen. I mean, I think, we do have to acknowledge that, running successful investigations, particularly successful investigations against organized crime and against corruption, is something that's very challenging. And that in the recent period, the police don't have an incredible track record in this area. If you just look at the recent cases that were enrolled following state capture, one of the first big cases was the New Lane investment case. And that case was thrown out, on the basis of a very scathing judgment from the presiding officer about the level of the police investigation. So there's no doubt that, the police are on the back foot, and that technology can assist them, presumably, in driving effective investigations, in gathering evidence. And then there are issues around securing that chain of evidence to be able to, present it before the courts. The challenge in this case is that, when the police go to get a warrant or to get the authorization, they don't do that in a public forum, because if they were to do that, it would then have implications in terms of tipping off, the people that are meant to be surveilled. So, there are some real fine details about this. We are going to have to put some reliance on the oversight that the judiciary would have over this. But I think the police are probably going to have to be a little bit open in terms of the policy and the principles by which they intend on using this technology in a way which is effective for their investigative needs, but that also guarantee rights, guarantee the rights of the public, and give some assurances that that we're not going to be in a situation where we're going to be now surveilled, in a context where it would be unauthorized or unjustified.
Ian, it is said that in China, for every 2 citizens, there is 1 surveillance camera. And so if we are worried about cell phone grabbers, for instance, in South Africa, and perhaps not just the technology, but obviously the manpower behind it, when you speak of integrity and unethical practice and guarding against that, does that then mean, Karam, you speak of technology assisting in combating crime, does that then suggest that perhaps South Africa is still some way to go if we are still worried, especially about the integrity of some processes?
No, look, obviously there's some technology I believe could work with a synchronized effort. While you clean up, you can, I guess, use certain types of technology. But it's ironic that you mentioned China as an example. Minister Becky Cele was in China last week to speak with the Chinese government about possible cooperation and to learn from them as to how to combat crime. And I commented about this morning and I said, we're looking at advanced technology use, but some police stations don't even have light bulbs or toilet paper. And so if we can't even do those very basic things, give police members the basic resources like pen and paper to use from day-to-day tasks, how on earth do we think we're going to do this properly? Now, I'm not even mentioning the discipline deficit in the South African Police Service. So, I think as you've rightly put or asked, I think there's a very, very long way to go for us to really say that we can use this type of technology adequately. We shouldn't jump the gun. I guess it's literally and figuratively speaking. I think there's a lot of of practical basic steps that need to be followed first. And to be honest, I would start with auditing most of the South African Police Service management before even touching something like this. I think the risks are far too high. The involvement, as we heard from Judge Tulare in the Western Cape last year, of organized crime cartels in the South African Police Service senior management is a reality. We know that it's happening. There's no secret about it. And before we can use this kind of technology, I think we need to clean up a little bit first.
Thank you very much to both our guests. Ian Cameron is with Action Society and Karam Singh is the director at Corruption Watch.